And I can't help but get excited when I feel like God has spoken to me.
Very good.
Like I can't keep it in. I have to get it out.
I think there's so much growth that is missed out on by men and women who relegate and diminish their marriage to their spouse only being their cheerleader and not allowing them to be their coach.
How does a dude come and holler these days?
So I would say something like, I think you're beautiful. I think your love for Jesus is beautiful. I would love the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better.
I think there was a reason why I didn't have like the career that I wanted or had in my mind. This is exactly what I want to do. This is what I'm going to college for. I felt like everybody around me had the thing that they were going to do. And I was just like, God, what's my thing?
The heart behind it is we're just going to do anything short of sin to reach someone for Jesus.
Hey, it's Rich, and you're listening to the Mature Me podcast, weekly content devoted to all things life, leadership, culture, and faith. Thank you for taking some time to tune in. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on all our social channels so you don't miss a thing. Let's listen to today's episode. Well, hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Mature Me podcast. My name is Rich Wilkerson Jr., and wherever you're at in the world, we are so grateful that you are joining us today. If you're listening by way of Spotify or Apple, do us a favor, leave us a review, click the star, leave a comment. If you're on YouTube right there, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, share this content. Once again, leave us a comment. All that helps so much. But this is the podcast that we talk all about, not just growing old, but growing up. And I really believe that we're all becoming someone or something. And the question is, who are you becoming? We want to grow wiser. We want to get better as we age. And today, we are so grateful because we have a wonderful guest. Before we get to our guest, we are joined by some OGs, some of my favorite people in the world. Dakota Duron is in the house. He's been wearing all black for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
He has tapped into his inner Johnny Cash.
It's part of my Mature Me journey.
And my goodness, you look great in a black silhouette. And also, we've got Bishop Manouchka Charles on. I actually want to start putting the claps in like that.
Yeah, I think we need to.
It'd be a vibe.
He's like a soundboard.
Yeah, I feel like Manu hasn't been here in ages. She's like,
Thank you for having me back. It's been a while.
You're busy.
You're
busy.
You're making it clear.
You're busy.
No, I'm
You're
just
busy.
honored to be asked to be on the pod. I was waiting. I was
No,
like,
you're
hey,
busy.
when are they going to ask me to come back?
You got an East Coast and a West Coast ministry.
Yeah, she had a Joshua tree.
Yeah,
Joshua tree.
Yes, I did have a Joshua tree.
Yeah, a wellness retreat,
Yep.
IVs. She
All
doesn't
the
do
things.
IVs. But we've got one of my favorite people on the planet in the house today on the Mature Me podcast for the first time. This is Pastor Reverend Charlie Hughes from Church by the Glades. It's about time, brother.
Let's go. Thanks for having me.
Bro, we're so happy that you're here.
Honored to be
and
here.
I thought for you to be here, there's no way you can be here without the rest of the home team, man.
Yeah.
This is this is the crew right here, man. But Charlie is one of my really good friends. He is a pastor here locally in South Florida, but also you probably have seen him and heard him minister all over the place. But we go way back, me and this guy. We actually went to the same high school.
We did. Westminster Academy.
Did you graduate from Westminster Academy?
I didn't. I graduated from Calvary Christian.
Why did you leave Westminster Academy? It's too Presbyterian?
Not that. Love WA. I actually had a great experience at Westminster. My sister was transferring to Calvary, and I couldn't drive when she transferred, so I had to transfer over to Calvary with her.
Man, Westminster Academy. Those were
Good
good
place.
days. We should just shout them out right now. They're a proud sponsor of this podcast.
Yeah.
I was almost suspended twice, never was.
Wow.
And I finished over there. Great people. Great people. Just keep saying that, you know?
I love them. Go Lions.
You went to private school? You went to private school?
I went to private school, Christian school, K through 12. I was what they call a lifer. And so, really enjoyed it.
Explain what a lifer is, because people got to hear that.
Lifer is you go to the same school your entire journey, K through 12, you know? So you get a little extra picture in the yearbook. It's no big deal. Manu had a very interesting...
And that made you very antisocial. Like you're not good with people.
Yeah, I feel like being raised in a bubble really affected me socially. I don't really know how to relate to anyone else that didn't go to a school like that.
If you're not a lifer, I can't do life with you.
Exactly.
That's my motto.
It's an exclusive thing.
Yeah,
you
totally.
know, so.
We're kidding if you can't catch the sarcasm. Mona, did you go to private school?
I went to private school for up until kindergarten, and then I went to good old New York City public school for the
I'm not gonna lie.
rest
When
of
you
my
said
career.
up
So
to,
Yeah,
I was like,
expecting
like middle school.
No,
up
like
to
kindergarten.
kindergarten.
I went to-
What's the education plan
Had
before
a big
kindergarten?
impact on
no, first
Amani.
grade. First grade. I went to a Battalion Christian Academy
Wow.
in Brooklyn, New York, and then transferred over to PS 272.
This is what I want to talk about.
Right, because you guys all went to private school. And
PS2
and it
is not
worked
a
out-
school, Manu. That's a gaming system.
No, but Manu, why in
it.
New York are the schools just like
Named.
numbers? It's
Well,
like they can't put any identity on these
Here's
things.
the thing: they do
What
have
is this?
They do have a name.
iRobot?
But there's so many schools. So PS
Ready
272
Player
was
One?
also called the Curtis Estabrook School. So the schools had numbers and names.
Oh,
So why,
okay.
whenever he asked you what school you went to, why did you revert to the number rather than the name? Does that
So-
say something
so
about you or the school?
Here's the thing. So when you do, here's how it goes for those who went to one school for their whole life. I'm gonna
Yeah,
break.
yeah.
I'm gonna break
He
it down.
doesn't understand
He doesn't
reality,
understand.
okay?
So the way it works in New York, so you go
Burst his bubble. Okay, sorry. Sorry.
elementary school. You usually it's PS 272. Whatever PS is. Your elementary school. When you go into middle school, it's IS. And so intermediate school. So I went to IS 383, which was also Philippa Schuyler. Shout out to Philippa Schuyler. Amazing school. But then by the time you get into high school, your high school has a name. And so I went to Edward R. Murrow for high school. So all the schools actually have a name, but elementary and middle school, you can call it by the name or the number.
What a gift that is to finally give a high schooler a real name for a high school, just to have some form of an identity.
We needed it.
You know, a vision. No, my brother lives in Harlem, and his kids go to school, and it's always like, yeah, they're going over to P45. I'm like, F45? I work out there too. No, this is their kindergarten. I'm like, what in the world? What in the...
F45 is ridiculous.
F45.
Yeah.
P90X.
I go to the F45 branch as well in Coral Gables. Yeah. So yeah, you went to Westminster Academy, and I think, Charlie, one of the things I want to chat about today, I want to get a little bit about your story, but I think today, how old are you now?
24.
Yeah, I'm just putting him on the spot. 24. And all of us have heard you preach and teach, and it's really quite something, and the gift that God's given you and the way that you operate and the way that you minister. But I think what makes it even more impressive is that you're 24, that you take your calling that serious, that you preach with such boldness and passion. There's a whole lot, I think, for us to learn from you. But I want to, before we get there, like, how in the heck did you get there? Talk a little bit about your upbringing, growing up in a pastor's home. Did you ever run from God? Were you ever a prodigal? Maybe tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So grew up in a pastor's home. My dad is my hero, has been my hero for as long as I can remember. My dad's name is David Hughes, pastor of Church by the Glades. My dad took the church over. He didn't take it, took leadership of the church.
That's a good clarification.
Yeah.
No, he didn't
Coup d'etat.
Yeah.
Because, by the way, we've heard of some hostile takeovers.
Right. That wasn't
Last
the case.
year, a guy tried to take our church. Wow, that was crazy. Came in with swords. We're like, bro, that's kind of an archaic instrument to do battle with, We're kidding. Sorry. It's early over here.
So he's been there for 25 years. I'm 24. He got there the year before I was born. And as long as I can remember, I've loved the church. I've thought the world of my dad. So when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, if someone were to ask me what I wanted to do when I grew up, I would tell them I wanted to be a pastor. And that was definitely had to do with me looking up to my dad and thinking so highly of my dad, even from a young age. But I do even think there was some genuine and sincere calling that I was beginning to already feel out as a kid. But then time goes on, and in middle school, I was like, you know what, maybe I'll play in the NFL, then I'll be a pastor. I definitely had a football dream for a moment. And then in 10th grade, when it became very clear to me, I'm not going to play in the NFL, that door kind of closed. I stopped playing sports. And at my church, the opportunities just kind of began to present themselves somewhat naturally for me to begin to lead out in different capacities, talk in front of people, and others began to affirm, yeah, you may be really geared and gifted for ministry. I never had a moment where I heard the voice of God. I know some people do have those moments. I think those are really special. That just wasn't the case for me. Just from the time I was young, there's just kind of been this lingering interest, and I believe sincere call that when I turned 16, I really began to grab hold of and really chase down. And at the age of 19, we started the ministry that I now lead today at our church called Rally, which is a young adult ministry for 18 to 30-year-olds. And I've been doing that ever since. But there's no real time in my life where I maybe walked away from my faith or tried to stiff arm my call. That just wasn't the case for me. And I think the reason for that more than anything was I was just more busy with what was going on at church. Like at my church, we have a Saturday night service. So that would be the night that if I were to do anything with my friends, I was already busy. There's already something on my schedule, on my calendar. So I wouldn't go to whatever party because for me, the party was at church. And I was a little too busy for whatever else to grab a hold of me and get my attention.
That's really beautiful. Your dad, who I love so much and I've gotten to know over the years, when he was raising you, did you guys like talk about that a lot? Like your dad, I want to be a preacher. And what were some things that my dad used to always raise us and he was always like, boys, I don't know how you're going to make a living, but you're all going to preach the gospel. I'm like, oh, okay, you might be a doctor,
100%.
but you'll be a doctor preacher.
Yeah.
Oh, you might be a lawyer. Now I'm preaching. You're going to be a lawyer preacher.
Right.
You might be a veterinarian. I don't know, a vet? What am I talking about? Like, who's that?
Like
you might
that,
be an
I don't wanna do
orthodontist,
that.
but you'll be putting braces on for Jesus. What?
Did you ever hear that and you're like, I don't know? Because I feel like my parents spoke that way to me. Even like now that I have kids, like my grandparents, like their grandparents, like they'll be like, you girls are going to be great preachers of the gospel. And that's really sweet to hear now. But for some reason, when I was a kid, sometimes when that was told to me, there was something in me that liked it and there was something in me that sometimes didn't. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
Even though I'd have daydreams and that's a really good terminology that you just used, by the way. I was talking to a middle schooler this past week, and they asked me, how do you hear the voice of God? And I think you just being honest and saying like, oh, it wasn't like necessarily a moment that I heard the audible voice of God. And I don't know if I've ever heard it the way you just put it, that it was a lingering interest. I think that that's a great way to say that God's putting something on your heart.
Right.
And I think the mature me understands that lingering interest is not an accident.
Right.
That God's putting that on your heart. But I think that's what I've loved about his story so much is it seems like he was able to grab a hold of his calling.
But when you would
so
hear
quick.
that at times, you'd kind of resist that or you'd resent it. Those are
I think I
strong
was
words.
just young, you know what I mean? And I think that there was whenever someone tells you you're going to do something, you like what you're being told that you are going to do, but you dislike the fact that that's excluding other things that you're probably not going to do. You know what I mean? And I think that I was just young and trying to figure out what I wanted, you know?
Did your dad ever say that to you, Manu?
He didn't.
Didn't?
He didn't. But I think that in the context that I grew up in, I never wanted to or expected to be a preacher. So it was probably like out of the norm for me, or it maybe came out of nowhere more so than growing up in a context of like with preachers. Like we grew up in church and so we were around the church, but it was never something that I ever expected to do or think about. And I think it just naturally, it's just one of those things where just like different opportunities would just show up. And then I'm like, oh, I think there's something here, or I think there's something there, you know?
If you don't have like a moment where you feel like heaven speaks, I feel like sometimes you can just know if you're called, if it just makes sense. Like I'm gifted for this. I seem to be geared towards it. Opportunities are presenting themselves. And I think another key thing is like others affirm it. Like I was blessed to have my dad obviously in my life, but also great youth pastors who were quick to call out what they saw in me. And they weren't speaking on behalf of God by any means, but they were like, bro, you may need to really consider this and think about it. And that was huge for me. Sometimes you just need others to give you the permission to really chase after something. Yeah. I feel like that's what they did for me, and I'm so grateful for that.
Would that resonate with you?
Yeah, totally. And I think the way that I would have grown up, like my dad was like really strict on education. It was like, you guys need to get good grades. You need to focus. So I think the study side of things, even the way that I study now, I think a lot of it stems from the way that he would push us to study for school. My mom was more focused on, all right, you guys are going to go to church, you're going to be involved in ministry. I think those are the two things that kind of were my foundation. But then, over time, it was, I think you should do this, or do you want to do this, or do you want to do this 5-minute thing or this 10-minute thing? And so just naturally things showed up, and you have a choice to make when those things present itself. You can either lean in or just like, actually, I don't want to do this at all. And I think that I decided to lean into it and go with what I felt the Lord was leading me to do. Because I never was that type of person that knew exactly. I was like, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer. I never had that.
Sure.
I've always been this go with the flow kind of person. I'm like, all right, let's see. And I feel like going with the flow has led me to where I am of getting a better understanding of clarity. And I think there was a reason why I didn't have like the career that I wanted or had in my mind, this is exactly what I want to do. This is what I'm going to college for. I felt like everybody around me had the thing that they were going to do. And I was just like, God, what's my thing? But I think that I didn't have a thing, because if I had a thing, it might have distracted me from what I was supposed to do. And so while it was really frustrating for me growing up and in college, not knowing exactly and just like, all right, I'm going to take this path, I think it was protecting me from the distraction of, all right, if I leaned into this career path, I would have never had time to even hear God pulling me into this direction of ministry.
So good. I think, considering some of the words that you're saying, I think it's important because we're sort of talking even about calling and discovering our calling, and people can get so abstract and so
100%.
super spiritual in the sense that it doesn't actually, become practical or concrete of any sort. And a lot of times calling just begins with just your natural gifting, just things that people celebrate in you, notice in you. I love that idea that God's going to take what's in your hand to fulfill what's in your heart.
Wow.
And I think for all three of you, what I know about you guys is that you guys love people, you love helping people, and you guys all three are communicators. I remember when I first was meeting Manu, long before she ever preached, I was like, oh, this woman is a communicator. Just from talking to her, like playing bananagrams, and she got mad at me, and she's like, no. I'm like, okay. She knows how to drop some burners. Like, you don't want to be, if we could just use that for the glory of God. But it's funny because there's like a gift there. And then as you begin to step out, God will take that thing and use it to fulfill what's actually in your heart. All three of you guys have relations with your dads. And I think one of the things I love about Charlie, it's funny because Charlie's 24, I'm 40. And in many ways, it's a funny relationship because I just think he's one of my good friends, but 100%. I also love the fact that I have a relationship with his dad. I'm like, how peculiar is that I like hanging out with his dad? Me and his dad will hang out one-on-one, and then I'll hang out with Charlie one-on-one. Yeah. But I'm also really, really like, at this point in my life, which is probably a different season, Dakota's sort of there, I'm going, how, David, did you raise Charlie? Like, I'm trying to learn some of that stuff. And all three of you still talk with your fathers, love your fathers, honor your fathers publicly. We were joking about your dad, which we have to probably tell that. Yeah. Manu's dad's on her right now about her hair.
He is. He'll send me a compliment text. He'll say,
tell me,
hey,
sandwich method.
That message was beautiful. I loved it. Your hair's too long. And I said, really, Dad? He said, yes, I'm your best critic. I was like,
I'm your best critic.
I love you. I'm not taking hair advice from you right now, but I did go shorter.
To honor my father.
To honor my dad. He's like, listen, the knee-length hair is a lot right now, and so you got to listen to your dad. And
a woman's hair is her glory.
I'm going to tell him that. Listen, I'm going to clip this and send it to my father.
Well, Charlie, think about your dad. Like, what are things that you can like observe at 24 that my dad did this really well, and this is to this day like he's my father, but he's also my friend.
Totally. I mean, he was a busy guy being in full-time ministry. Like, you're never truly off the clock when you're a pastor, but he did such a good job at keeping myself and my siblings a priority. He always got time with each of us as individuals, but also just time with the three of us all together. Something my dad would do just that stuck with me. Like, he would take each of us to Disney by ourselves. Like, he would leave my sister at home and take me to Disney. He would leave me at home, take my sister to Disney. Like, he was very intentional at having moments with us that he would create and curate, but we felt like, oh my gosh, how cool that we fell into this moment. Like, my dad had a plan. He orchestrated all of it. I think my dad was so smart about how he immersed us in the church. Like, he made church something we wanted to be a part of. He was very big on, we had to attend a service that was appropriate for our age group. And we also had to attend a big Sunday gathering that he would preach at. But outside of that, he was like, you can come to as much or as little church as you want. And at our church, at the most of my childhood, we ran like 7 services. So we could be at all 7 services, or we could go to the 2 that we knew we needed to be at and then go home. So it was something, church wasn't an option, but after we fulfilled our household requirement, we didn't have to go to any more. And with having that choice, to a degree, it made church something that we really loved and felt like, yeah, I want to be a part of this. And it made church something that we could enjoy. Much like Vu, I think our church is a cool church. It's something that I like to be at. It's not something I'm embarrassed to invite my friends to be a part of. But my dad did a really good job, especially being the pastor, making church a place that myself and my siblings could always find a safe place at, and it'd be a place that we could find fun. Like if there's anything cool that 13-year-old Charlie Hughes could experience at church, my dad made sure I got to experience it. Like our church is a little out of the box. So like if there's like an animal he had on stage for an illustration, like I got to pet the donkey. I got to look at the elephant up close. Like these are all real things that happen. If there's anyone cool I can meet at church, I got to meet that person. Like,
why did you guys have a donkey on the stage? Because
this is a true story. My dad was preaching about politics one weekend. He had a donkey and an elephant to talk about
Right,
those.
'cause I'm like, you went with the donkey. I was curious about the elephant.
Yes. There's an elephant there?
We had an elephant on stage.
I feel like there's a few
Yeah, you wanted to
donkeys in
see
the
the
Bible.
jackass? Come on, man. Why not go to the elephant? That's biblical,
Yeah.
by the way. Chill,
Right, right,
mature me.
Yeah.
We've had lions. We've had everything at church. It's been crazy. But
Hold on.
yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah, slow
What do you
down
mean you've
there.
had lions and elephants and everything at church?
I mean, Jesus is the lion, right? So
Oh my
my dad had a
gosh.
lion on stage for Easter one year.
Really?
True story.
How do you get an elephant to church?
Yeah.
We're in a
Wait,
high school, so I don't think
this-
they would
this-
allow
this-
that.
elephant.
Is there like a
church at
garage
John Hopkins.
door in the
I'm
back
not
of this
over
We
thing?
do. We have a
elephant.
giant garage door where my dad built the building we're currently in. He said, I want our stage to be so big that I could drive a Sherman tank on it if I want to. So our stage can handle that much weight. We have a giant garage door. We've never had a tank on the stage, but we've had elephants, we've had lions, we've had pretty much
What was
an
the type
entire
of tank
zoo.
that you said?
Sherman tank.
What is
It's
that?
like that World War II
that
tank
from, like,
that you're
Fury?
like,
I'm
that
so
you're, like,
glad
you're
I wasn't the
picturing in
only
your
one who
head.
didn't know what
exactly.
that was.
No, the
I
way
didn't
he
want-
described
I
that,
didn't
it's
want to
like-
ask. I was like, maybe this is a thing that people know. I was like, let me just stay out of this
The
one.
way he said that, that's a previously talked about consideration. Well, can it fit a Sherman tank? Like, oh my gosh. Wow. Okay.
Oh,
Hold
it's
on.
just
We
rolling
got to
off the
backtrack a
tongue
little
right
bit
now.
here. There was an elephant.
Yeah.
Where do you get an elephant?
There's like this privately owned zoo somewhere in Homestead,
Okay.
and they got elephants.
Greg, write that down.
Yeah.
I think we need that.
Want to hear a crazier story though? When we had the lions,
Give me a crazy story.
when we had the lions. You guys remember the Netflix documentary Tiger King?
I do.
Oh my gosh. That's
Remember,
Dakota's favorite
You
know.
remember Carol Baskins?
Of course I remember Carol.
Shout out to Carol.
Yeah.
What was her like sanctuary called for?
Oh,
Big Cat Rescue. That was it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we had a lion
Lovely lady.
at church. Carol Baskin sent her people after us for having the lion. She wasn't
For
happy
real.
about it.
And what does
so
that
if you-
mean exactly?
So if
She
you go
sent
to
her people after
she made a
us.
video about Church by the Glades saying they had a lion on stage. It was obviously in a cage. She's like, that's not. We treated the animal great, by the way, but she's
Yeah.
like, that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
So she told all of her people to go to our church's Yelp and leave terrible reviews. So like. For a while, they're like, we had like 1 star on Yelp because there were literally
Oh.
thousands
Churches
of
on Yelp
reviews.
is
PETA was after you guys?
Yeah, Big Cat Rescue people specifically, but PETA probably doesn't like us either.
Oh
But
my
we love
gosh.
animals. We treat them great when they're
Take
with
care of 'em.
us. Yeah,
pretty
Oh
awesome.
my goodness.
But yeah.
So those that are watching right now, maybe they've heard of Church by the Glades, maybe they haven't. But Church by the Glades is a very large church in Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale area now, and it continues to reach so many people in South Florida. But it does come under some criticism from time to time.
Right.
Primarily, I guess, because of its unconventional methods or ways of reaching people.
Totally.
So it sounds like you're kind of going into some of that territory here with elephants, Sherman tanks. Just for the fun of it, since we're sitting here,
Yeah.
give us some wild. Well, maybe give the heart behind some of this stuff, but
Yeah.
then give us some of the wild stuff that me, Dakota, and Manu have never ever seen or heard.
Right. So the heart behind it is we're just going to do anything short of sin to reach someone for Jesus. And some people say, like, well, why is that the line? Like, why do we have to get that close? Like, anything just short of sin was like, because there are people way on the other side of that line. And sometimes you have to get to as close to the line as you can to reach the people that are way on the other side of it. It's harder to reach them the further away from that line you get. And we also live by something that in our church and in our house, what we call disciplined creativity. Like, we never do something creative or unconventional or out of the box for no reason. It always has a purpose. It's disciplined creativity.
I
What
like
that
that.
means is whenever we maybe do a secular song that, first of all, we always scrub-a-dub-dub and squeaky clean and make it even more clean than the radio edited version. Whenever we do that, it's with a purpose. It always ties directly in either to the message or to the greater series of the message collection or series, whatever you want to call it. And we use that as a launching pad for whatever's talked about in church that day. Like, my dad likes to say that whenever we do something creative, whether it be a song or bring in an animal or a visual on stage, it's not part of the time of worship, that being the music that's played, but it's part of the message. It's a moving, talking, walking sermon illustration.
Great.
And we're just doing that to get people to do this. Just unfold their arms. We're trying to sneak attack them with the gospel, essentially.
Yeah.
Just get them more receptive without them even knowing it necessarily. So that's the whole heart behind it. We just want to see people come to know Jesus, and sometimes you have to speak their language before you can speak the gospel to
How
them.
has that criticism affected you?
Me personally,
Yeah.
it hasn't really bothered me because I'm so used to it. Like as long as I can remember, there have just been people not saying nice things about my dad and about my church, but I'm just so bought into the mission, and I understand why we do what we do, that I'm like, they just don't get it, and that's all right. I show them grace for that, and it's all right. I know why we do what we do. I know Jesus knows my heart, so I live in that peace.
Yeah. Give us something that you're like, this was crazy. Like, I don't know. Like,
I mean, you could.
I think an elephant's crazy.
Elephant's crazy. It doesn't get much. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't get much crazier than that. I mean, my dad is, I don't fully remember what the context was for this moment, but he's like propelled upside down from our catwalk as Spider-Man, and my mom like took off his mask and like gave him a kiss, and he went and like preached.
Stop, bro.
I promise you.
Unbelievable.
Can we like
Charlie,
We need the clip.
You gotta clip that.
Charlie,
We
That
need the
happened.
clip.
Blair,
That's not
are you
true.
listening?
I promise you.
hold on.
Then
Which
Mom
one?
came on stage and took the
his mask off.
Hold on.
And then what was the message?
That's the most iconic
Yeah.
kiss in movie history.
Like,
I remember
right?
I'll tell you what the
Everybody
message was.
appreciate-
To those with great power comes great responsibility.
There it is.
Greet each other with a holy kiss.
Oh my gosh. Which Spider-Man was he? Was he like Tobey Maguire
Yeah,
Spider-Man?
Yeah,
That's
this would have been
Of
Tobey
course.
Maguire
Okay.
days.
He's cooler than
Sadly,
that.
yeah.
He's cooler than that. So he descended down.
Yes.
Wow.
Much like Jesus did.
Yes. Yes.
So stupid.
That's what it was.
Like,
All right.
correct.
That's what it was.
What is that's okay. So you really, I wasn't prepared for
We've had a
this in the
pit of
conversation.
alligators on stage, and my dad preached in the middle of them.
What?
That happened. I'm trying to remember.
I want Manu to do that next Sunday.
Can I?
Manu,
But I don't want to.
if
I
we
want somebody else in
said
the pit.
you're going to
want
preach in
somebody
a
else in the
pit
pit.
of alligators, you would kill somebody.
Yeah.
There's no way you're doing that.
I'm not getting in the pit, but I'd like to like see the pit.
But what I would like you to do is put a Spider-Man costume on.
We this is more of like our usual. Like I'm
Oh my
giving you
gosh.
the extreme examples,
Wonder
but like
Woman.
our usual creative flow is something more like this. Like
Okay, tell us.
we just finished a series at church called Built for the Battle,
Okay.
and we have a whole bunch of LEDs on our stage, and all the LEDs were configured to look like a World War II battleship.
Okay.
And on the LEDs were like videos of women working on the ships, like they were constructing it. It looked like an incomplete battleship. There's like cranes moving in the background and stuff. Pre-service, we had like actual like actors on stage, like hammering stuff and like using like a saw, and there's like sparks flying.
Wow.
And the whole premise for this series is we use the historical example of how when during World War II, there were millions of American men who went overseas to fight Hitler and the Nazis. This left millions of vacant positions in factories that for the first time in American history, we saw women step up and fill and do and be what up to that point America had never seen women do or be before. And we use that historical example in our country to then run to biblical examples of women in Scripture who, in their context and in the culture they lived in, stepped up and decided to be and do what women had never been or done before. So my dad said, like, this is a parable. This is how Jesus taught. He would use something that was culturally relevant to then preach spiritual truth. And that's just what we try to do
Very
whenever we
good.
do anything
I think
creative.
I have no problem with any of that. I think that I think what happens sometimes is that people can just see the tip of the iceberg, and it's very easy to criticize the tip of the iceberg.
For sure.
But when you get into it, oftentimes you'll find that there's much more depth behind these types of things, and there's a purpose and a reason. And if you don't want to be criticized, well, then don't do anything worthwhile. But there's different styles. There's different types of methods of reaching people. I think the message remains the same, and our methodology it can change from person to person. There's different churches with different names over the doors because there's different people going to
got it.
these
Right.
churches.
It's great.
I do love that. I've always wanted to do a collection because everyone's like, it'd be fun to do a collection on like, I don't know, great women of the Bible, Ruth and Esther and Deborah. But what if we did like, I don't know, like the bad girls of the Bible.
Right.
Jezebel, and Delilah,
You should.
We're going to do it?
Who else would there be? There'd be Jezebel, Delilah, and
Bathsheba.
Oh, there.
It's not her
She
fault.
wasn't bad.
It wasn't
victim.
her. It wasn't her
Come
fault
on,
though.
that's the
She's a
problem. That's the
victim.
problem
See, that's the problem right there. And you said it.
Come on,
That's what.
Manu.
Oh
That
man,
right
now I'm
there.
done. I'm
You've been
canceled.
living in a man's world, and they've reframed you. You've turned.
Unreal.
Bathsheba, we love you, Bathsheba.
We love you. I'm
It
sorry.
was David when he was supposed to go off to war, but
Right.
he
He
stayed
stayed
back.
back.
She was a
And he just
victim. She was a victim.
happened on to the
roof,
balcony.
vibing
and
out.
there's Bathsheba in the
Course.
bath. If that's not a setup, I don't know
Yeah.
what is.
Unbelievable.
If that's not a clue to the story, your name is Bathsheba, and we know you for taking
Bad Girls
a
of the
bath.
Bible is wild.
There we go.
Girls of the
Bad
Bible.
Girls of the Bible.
That's wild. One thing that I
Delilah,
find interesting that your
Jezebel.
dad said you have to go to a group your age, a church service your age, and a church service for the adults. One thing that they found in studies, I don't know if your dad saw this or it might be a new study. What's called sticky faith. One of the things that they're seeing is that people who continue to go to church after high school are generally people who have been in adult services as kids.
Whoa.
It's intergenerational worship.
Whoa.
And so one of the things that we've talked about, we're launching a middle school ministry, for instance, and we had this idea of should we have them in worship and then dismiss them after, or should we just have them do something else the whole time? And whenever we talked to this company, they were like, you guys' plan of leaving after worship is actually really smart because studies show that intergenerational worship is actually extremely sticky for people's faith. So I think that's really interesting, but also to go to something your age, to develop the community and to get excited. I think one of the things, just as we're talking about mature me, I'm a huge David Hughes fan too. Just since I met your dad, and he's someone that I respect so much and love so much. And I agree, having kids, but even not having kids, I've always so honored and loved you because at 17, you're taking yourself serious enough to stand up in front of your peers and not just preach. I think that there's high schoolers that preach, but you're taking swings. You're writing messages. You're going on runs, young. And what that means, this dude is bringing it.
I love when we go inside out here. You're like, someone's driving the car
Preaching
run. What's a
yeah.
run? Like he's jogging? No, it's preacher language.
He's running around the stage.
Yeah.
No, he's preaching.
Yep.
And what I've loved about that is that you took your calling serious from a young age. And I honor you for that, but I also honor your dad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think oftentimes as leaders, what we can do is we can build things that we would enjoy. Make things about us.
Right.
I'm going to build my business just so it could serve people like me.
Right.
But I think mature me understands life is about legacy.
Yep.
Very good.
And life is about serving the next generation. If we all live to serve the next generation in our businesses and our homes and our churches, everything will last a lot longer. I think things that die are the things
Very
that you
good.
serve you, because as you grow older and you're done, it leaves with your generation. And what your dad has done is, even as he's older, your church is still cutting edge. And I think that that's extremely selfless. And I think it's also just extreme leadership insight that's not only affected his church, but it's affected his home.
Yeah. Wow.
Because he said, I'm going to live with legacy to go, I could sing songs from when I was a kid, or I could figure out what's happening right now in the church world, and I'm going to go reach young people for Jesus. And I think that's one of the reasons you're standing here. I know you would say the same thing, is just because your dad's like, you know what? I want to create a place that Charlie and Zane would love to go to church. So that inspires me.
Well, he's a risk taker. And I
Yes.
think there's something to be said about that. And it's, once again, it's easy to criticize, but you can either be a chef or you can be a food critic. I'd rather be the chef.
That's
you can either
great.
be an artist or an
about
art
that.
critic.
That's really great.
You can either make a movie or just criticize it. And so I'm not really interested in the people that are criticized. I'm interested in the people that are actually putting action and trying to do something. And he's been swinging at South Florida for decades now, and we're seeing results. Now, when you take risks, you're bound to, have some things not always go right, make some mistakes along the way. I do have a question for all of us here. We're going to get to it. That's going to hopefully be fun. But sometimes, I think illustrations and stuff like that, I'm all for it, bro. I'm not a critic. I'm like, I want to believe the best intentions.
Yeah.
But I have seen some stuff before that's like, oh, that's kind of cringe.
Yeah.
I saw a clip, and I don't know who these people are.
Oh, gosh.
God bless him. I don't have a problem with it. It's just kind of like, oh, that's different. And I saw it was like Jesus on the cross. It was like a passion play. And he's like hanging from the cross, and all of a sudden,
I can't wait
I
to
don't
hear
know if
where
I've
this is
seen
going.
this. Have you seen this?
I'm terrified right now.
Right. I am at the edge
it's
of
not
my
going to be
seat.
that funny to y'all.
Okay.
It just makes me laugh so hard because I
He's
should have
gone.
laughed
We
like
lost
that.
him.
It's so
We
mean.
lost him.
I know, because I think the heart behind this was great. It's just Jesus from the cross, and like while he's hanging from the cross, he starts singing. Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. I know we're having a great conversation, but I want to talk to you about something really important to me, especially if you're a pastor listening right now to the Mature Me podcast. Listen, after almost 20 years in ministry, I know what it means to be in the trenches day in and day out of building the church. And what I have learned is that lasting alone, well, it's impossible. The only way you're going to sustain and the only way you're going to grow is you've got to get around like-minded leaders. That's why we're hosting our VU Friends and Family Pastors Assembly. January 2025 in Miami. It's a 2-day gathering of training and impartation designed for you, the leader, the pastor, to lead with practical and spiritual handles. Last year, we had close to 500 pastors and leaders in the room alone, and I just know that this year is going to be even better. I want you to get registered right now. If you're a pastor, bring your team, bring your spouse, be with us in Miami, VU Church. Go to pastorsassembly.com. Let's get back to the combo. Jesus from the cross, and like while he's hanging from the cross, he starts singing Bryan Adams.
No.
Look into my
No.
eyes, you
No.
will see what you mean to me. Search your heart, search your soul, and when you find me there, you will search no more. You can't tell me it's not worth fighting for.
That's great.
Can't tell me it's not worth dying
can't.
for. You know it's true. Everything I do it for you. Like, I love that song.
I don't know.
And I get the heart. I just don't think
It's from
Jesus is
Christ
singing a song
himself.
from 94 from
Right.
the Robin Hood movie.
Right.
Everything I do it for you.
That's tough.
That's a little tough for me.
That's tough.
I don't know why it makes me laugh so
It's
hard.
tough.
But
hilarious.
that's a little different, you know?
Yeah.
But hey,
I think any singing.
just a clip that
from
popped in there, I was
someone
like,
that's dying.
well, it's just Jesus in a
In any
loincloth
context,
with
like-
blood all over his
like,
body.
let's take
And the
even
thing he wants to
Jesus out
sing
of it.
to
Like,
the entire world
just-
of all time is Bryan Adams. Wait a minute, isn't that Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves? Wasn't that Kevin Costner in 1992?
Not all things translate well on video too. Like maybe a hit in the room. Who
I
knows?
didn't say it didn't.
What a
Wow.
nice guy.
No, they're the best. That's why.
Wow.
That's why he is who he is.
Oh,
Right.
man.
He's had to
me.
say that before.
Full of grace and truth.
No, I mean, are you
Had
kidding
to.
me? Bro, I've been clipped so many times saying the weirdest stuff. Greg was telling me one time afterwards, we had some service and then people were complaining the next week. And like the comments was something like, yeah, I've been coming to this church and there wasn't a seat for me and I'm a regular attender. And for
Oh
some
my
reason,
gosh, that's the
like I went
best.
off about regular attenders.
I
And so
remember this.
the guys clip it always and it's like, I didn't build a church for regular attenders. It's like, what is that phrase? Like,
Right.
now we're mad at people for coming to church consistently. Now we're mad at people for
Hips are
faithfully coming.
dangerous,
But
man.
the cheers were crazy when you said that. The
Oh,
room
man.
went wild.
Because there was something behind it. It's kind of
We're
like Robin and
yeah.
It
Prince
was
of
a moment I'll
Yeah.
never forget.
Right. I'm like, we all are regular attenders. And we're like,
Yeah, like I'm not a regular attender. This is God's house.
Yeah.
And I'm a doorman. Okay, I'm sorry.
Ain't nothing regular about me.
Ain't nothing regular about me.
What was
Not
awesome
basic.
about that, though?
Sorry, I don't know why.
'Cause we had
Does,
a
hold
big-
on, does the Robin Hood song make you laugh at all or not really?
Of course. That's what I was saying. Like, take the crucifixion out of it. Anyone that is dying, that is singing, is
It's a
intense.
lot. Yeah, it's a
That's
lot.
it's
It's
a
a
music.
lot.
It's
Right.
art.
It's like
though. It's a
Hamilton.
musical.
Yeah, no, it was.
I
It was
respect
theatrical.
that.
Right.
I respect
If
that.
you understand
Yeah.
the arts, then
And
it
going
would've
back
probably
to
resonated.
I will not
Education
give
in
up my
schools.
shot.
I am not throwing away my shot.
Yes.
I'm a big Hamilton fan.
Me too. Are you
Yeah,
kidding
yeah.
me? Are you kidding me? I
Never
love
seen it.
Hamilton.
You've never seen it.
What?
You
Sorry.
really need to go. You don't need to go to
Mature
the theater. Disney
him.
Plus has
Mature
a great
him.
version. But yeah, you need to. It's key.
I'll watch it.
Yeah.
All right,
Before
sorry,
year
I
ends.
cut you off. I'm sorry. I don't know why. We were talking about crazy illustrations, and I just saw this thing on my phone the other day. It made me laugh. But what were you saying though? I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Can't remember.
I'm reaching. Brian Adams took
what
me
I
off.
was thinking just now as we were talking, because there are preachers here, and we've already gone so insider with it. Give me like maybe your most embarrassing or your worst preaching moment that just maybe top of your head, like all three of you. Like what's something that you're like?
I'll
that
tell
was
you mine
bad.
right now.
All
I was telling the students last night. So I have this thing that if I'm going to do something that's uncomfortable or hard, and like it's like jumping in the cold bath mentality,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
jumping in a cold pool. I don't even get in ice baths, by the way. Like I'm not that big of a fitness guy like that. I don't need to get in an ice bath. It's hard for me
Yeah, I
to
have
get
3
in a
children.
cold pool. You know what I mean? It's hard for me to get in the ocean in March. You know what I'm saying? And so for
In
me,
Miami.
if I'm going to go and do something hard or jump in cold water, it's not like I'm done hyping myself up like, come on, let's go. And then jumping in, I'm actually trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to think less about it as possible and just like walk towards it mindlessly and just jump in, you know? And so that's how, like, whenever I'm going to do something hard, that's kind of my mindset. And it reminded me, I was telling some college boys about this last night, that in 2018, we had only 2 locations. We had 6 services. 5 of them were live, or 4 of them were live. 1 of them was video. 5 services, sorry. 4 of them were live. 1 of them was video. I was helping oversee the location with the 1 video service on the day.
What a joy.
So it was, of course, the most packed service.
Yeah.
And
powerful.
and it wasn't even like a stream. It wasn't like an internet issue. It's like, this is the easiest video play, but for some reason, right before this particular day, you're preaching that day, and you said, family, this is the most difficult sermon that I've ever had to preach at VU Church. That's how you open that day. And of course,
gosh.
this is the Sunday that they come to me right when service starts and say, hey, we can't get the video working.
No.
So they hand me the notes, your notes. I go to the back for a bit for 35 minutes. They are trying to get this video to work. And the worship leader that day did an excellent job of trying to extend the last song before the sermon as long as they could. I mean, they're doing just the drums, you know? Just the voices. Let's do it in Spanish, you know? It's like every version, they're just dragging this thing out. And I just remember sitting in the side stage, and they end the song, and the cymbals are hitting, da-na-na-na-na-na-na. And I look at the producer, and the producer looks at me, and they're waiting on the final word, and they say, you're on. And I had to preach your notes on the fly. And I just remember, for some reason, getting off your notes. Like, why would you want to engage
What
with
was
the
the
crowd?
sermon?
The suicide deception.
The suicide
gosh.
The
deception.
suicide deception.
What was it about?
It was about suicide.
I'm not
You're a better
laughing
man than me, bro. I would have
at
got
the
so
topic.
selfish in that
So-
moment.
Dakota.
I would have preached whatever I wanted.
So,
after that.
Why didn't you?
So listen.
I would not have.
He
gone
was
with those notes.
Yeah,
nice that
preach
day.
something
He was
else.
nice that day. He was like, "Hey, great job!" Like, he did it. The next day, he was like, "Hey, if that ever happens again, man, you can just preach something else." You know?
It's like
Why didn't you
John
guys
3
tell
verse
me this
16.
before?
That's literally what I was
preach the
thinking.
gospel.
This man went up and winged a sermon on suicide.
I read mostly, but I remember I got off the notes, and you said that day, you said, "Contentment is comparison robs contentment." And I
believe
just
that.
remember starting the sentence, "Comparison robs," and I just remember thinking in my mind, you don't know what comparison robs.
Oh my gosh.
You don't know.
I just repeated the line again, and I said, "Comparison robs beauty, church. It robs
It does.
beauty."
That's
So
true.
that's by far my most insane preaching story. So anyway,
Bro,
top
that is
Right.
crazy.
I mean, that has happened to me twice.
That
at a
has
church,
happened to
but
you.
I might go.
what
a
you had to
different
go?
story.
You had to go up unprepared, or
I'm-
you had to go up?
I remember it was VU Girl. I'll
Yep.
tell these two quick, but then there's another one. It was VU Girl. You were sitting right there, and I was like, surely if something happens, our pastor will get up and come lead the room. He's
Oh
been
my
preaching
gosh.
longer than I've been alive, you know. And
You're on.
the video went out, and we're like, well, wait a second. It came back on. It went out a second time, and you looked at me, like, if it goes out a third time, you're going up there. And I was like, me? Me?
That's leadership development.
And then I get up there and preach afterwards. You're like, that's the best sermon you've ever preached. I was like, I don't know
gosh.
if
That was this year?
this happened like
No, it was like 2019. Yeah.
But
By the way, I
this-
hate
but-
that compliment. I try not to say it to
Right,
people
right.
because, like, I don't think you've
I
heard
was
me
like,
much.
I felt pretty terrible. But this year it did happen where a video didn't work. And, I'm just making my way to church. It's a
You
normal
crushed it the night of
Sunday.
Voo Girl, by the way.
Oh,
I was there.
I love you.
I don't know if it was-
You were there.
No. I mean, I was there. I'm saying
there.
you crushed it.
I was fully
I was
expecting
going to
you
say, I
to
don't know.
help me.
I don't like when people say it's the best you ever, but you crushed it.
But I think you were, or maybe, I don't know if you said it or somebody else said it, but either way, it was said, and I was like, okay.
yeah.
But this year it did happen again
so
when the
don't
video
prepare
didn't work,
anymore
and I had
and
to.
just wing it when I go up there.
Hey, I was reading Pastor DC's notes, and so best sermon she's ever preached.
Was that
again.
pretty nerve-wracking?
It was very nerve-wracking because that was early in my preaching days. Like I had maybe 5 sermons under my belt.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Probably.
Bless the Lord.
And
Thank you,
so-
Jesus. God, we love you.
You know.
Oh, we love you, Holy. Thank you. Come, Holy Spirit. Go ahead and reach for your Bibles. Those are all fillers.
100%. You got to do what you got to do.
All right, what's the other one?
So it happened again this year, but one of I think my favorite preaching moments, I was preaching at VU High.
Yeah.
I was preaching a sermon called Lean on Me. And I was preaching from the text where Aaron and her are holding up, what's his name? Moses' hands. I'm such a great preacher, as you can tell.
It's a fire title, though.
Yeah.
And
That's a great title.
and so I call up, the way that I do the sermon, I call up one kid to be Moses and have his hands up. And then I call up 2 kids to be Aaron and her. And I called up 2 kids, and this one girl, in true Miami fashion, is in a full crop top.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was like, all I could think about is the video that's going to be released of a girl in a crop top holding up somebody else's arm. And so I did this whole thing right in the middle of the sermon. I was like, hey, you strong enough to hold up his arms? And I was like, you're not strong enough. Let's get somebody else up here. And I sent her down. I was like, let me get can I get some boys to do this example, please? I was like, come on. I was
That's
like,
a
really? At
great
VU
switch
High?
up,
I was
though.
like, oh gosh,
course.
help me, Lord. I need to
We're
pick.
working on it.
You need to pick people in advance for youth ministry is what I've learned. And so I've never used anybody as an example. I don't do illustrations.
Right.
I just can't. It's just
Smart.
I'm like,
It's
it's
good
like
advice.
risk
Too many
takers.
wild
I was like,
cards.
I don't want to take risk. I actually want to keep it.
you don't
keep
want
it
any more
safe.
wild cards.
Yeah.
Charlie, give us one.
I got 2. One is not my story. It's my friend's, but he wouldn't mind me sharing it. It was his first time, because Dakota brought up runs earlier, so I'll give some context. It was like just kind of gearing up and getting into it. One of my best buddies, it was his first time preaching, and he kind of had a moment in his life where he kind of rebelled, for lack of a better word, and walked away from his faith, but God got a hold of him again. So he was sharing his testimony, his first ever message, put some scripture to it, and then at the end, he told me he was hitting a run and ramping up. He's like, you're the head and not the tail. If you're not dead, God's not done. And just completely like fumbled over his words. And he said, like, I kid you not, he said into the mic to the whole room of like middle or high schoolers that he was talking to, I tried. And then he just prayed out right in the middle. I was like, that would be so tough.
I
shoulda bought a Honda.
I should have bought a Honda, but I
He's
bought a
like,
Kia.
I
Do you have
tried.
your heavenly language? You
Dear
start
Lord.
speaking in tongues at that point because
But my worst preaching moment was my first ever message. I was preaching for
Oh my gosh.
a friend of my dad's in Northport, Florida. Actually, this friend of my dad's, his daughter goes to VU, leads worship, Hope Cross.
Oh wow. Shout out
Yeah,
Hope.
so her dad, Dr. John Cross, hero, I preached for him at South Biscayne Church in Northport, Florida, to their youth group on a Wednesday night of about probably like 90 middle and high schoolers. And I was already getting into preaching at that point, watching on YouTube. I mean, like guys like you, Pastor Stephen Furtick, others. So I was kind of already becoming a preaching nerd and watching pretty religiously as other guys. So like, and I've listened to my dad my whole life. So I'm like, I kind of know like what it takes to do this. Like
I've watched
how
4
hard
YouTube
could it-
videos
yeah,
of
how
Pastor
hard
Rich.
could it
How
be?
hard
I
could
could
preaching
do
ever
this.
be?
Yeah, it seems easy enough for them. But with it being my first time, my dad had enough like foresight to be like, why don't you preach one of my messages since it's your first time ever preaching? So he gave me an outline for one of his sermons, and I still remember what it was. The sermon was titled ER. It was kind of the whole idea, like if the church
put the Spider-Man costume on,
right?
Get the Spider-Man costume
I was wearing
out.
scrubs actually. The sermon was
Stop. Were you?
stethoscope.
I believe it.
Sorry, it makes me laugh. You wore scrubs in youth group. Tonight's message is ER. I'm getting ready to do surgery.
Use me as a scalpel, Lord. No, I'm kidding.
Dear God.
This generation, you carry a stethoscope. You got the style, but no substance.
Right.
What is Charlie talking about?
He's 17.
Right, like
You are
You're
our generation.
16, Charlie.
Yeah.
The whole sermon is built around the idea, like
I'm
Jesus
Doogie
saying,
Howser for Jesus.
Doogie Howard for Jesus.
Oh, sorry. Keep going. So it's called ER.
Like
Keep going.
when
This is
Jesus said, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. It's
beautiful.
And so from that,
I'll take this outline right now.
I just went to the idea, like, so if that's the case, then the church, like, shouldn't be some social club just for saved people, but should be a hospital for sinners. If that's the case, then us as Christian people who make up the church, like, we need to be the ambulance, and we need to take the people into the ER that is this church that wants to see lost people be found and sick people be healed, and and you get it. And so my dad gives me this outline, and I read it over a time or two. I listened to the
time or two.
Literally, I listened to the sermon on
I'm
YouTube.
sorry.
I think once, and that was all the prep I did. I had 25 minutes to preach. I felt really confident going into it, like I'm gonna kill this.
Yeah.
And I get up there with my notes.
Oh my gosh.
And about 12 to 15 minutes into my 25 minutes, like my mind just went blank. Lost my place in my notes. Couldn't find where I was. My palms got sweaty. My heart began to race. My mouth got really dry, and I began to panic. So I just prayed out right in the middle of the sermon, and it was the worst sermon I ever preached. And every kid had left that night just like so confused. But it was maybe the greatest learning experience I ever had preaching.
How long did you fill the time?
No, I ended with like 12 minutes left on the clock.
So you did about 13?
Yeah.
Solid.
And ended just right in the middle.
Solid.
But it taught me like what it actually took
Yes.
to prepare for a message. And afterwards I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, I lost my place in your notes, my notes. How do I like keep track during the flow of message? He's like, oh, like personally, Charlie, like I don't use notes when I preach. And I was like, why didn't you tell me that before I got up there? He's like, you didn't ask. I was like, well, lesson number one, ask questions.
Right.
Learn.
But it taught me just what it goes in
Very
to
good.
prepare. Like that, if I were to have taken a test on those notes, because I was in school at the time, like knowing just what it took for me to get a decent grade on a test, I probably would have got a B if I had to take a test on that sermon. But I learned just from that experience, like if you're going to preach a sermon, a message, like you can't just study to pass the test. You got to study so much you could write the test. And that was the biggest takeaway. So the next time when I got an opportunity to preach at my church, because my youth pastor didn't know how poorly that first sermon went, I came correct, and I was studied, I was prepared, and I didn't need notes, and that really set the tone for really my 8 years of preaching since then. And that was a formative experience for me.
The stumble, the fall, you rose to the occasion the next time. That's amazing. I have so many bad preaching moments. Like I've bombed miserably. I've been cursed out. I've had.
That's not true.
Wait.
Yeah.
Cursed out by
You got to tell
who?
that story.
I mean, there's too many stories. I mean, I one time was cussed out by a kid who kept shouting that Allah lives and F you
Oh,
the
like,
whole way out in
while
the
you
service.
are
Yeah, it's like,
preaching.
okay, everyone back up here.
At
Okay.
VU?
No, this is like when I was like 18 preaching.
wow.
Wow.
We definitely had people at VU heckle and start doing. You have to escort them. It's like, okay,
Gosh.
man, let me do my job. Like you don't know.
Right, trying to make jokes.
I don't come to your job. Like I don't know.
Right.
You say dumb stuff. When I'm thinking about this, the story that comes to my mind the quickest. This wasn't that long ago. This was like in the last 5 years. I was preaching for Craig Rochelle. That's a fun one to bomb at. I don't think I've ever told this story before.
At Life Church?
Yeah, I'm at Life Church, the largest church in America.
I worked there, you know.
Well, we can't all be you, Charlie, okay? My dad.
At 24.
I interned there to be
Could
clear.
you imagine
for
my
summer.
dad in a Spider-Man costume? The silhouette would be awful, okay? We don't all get what the Hughes family has. Imagine my dad. Come on, stop. We have to stop. We might not even air this podcast. A lot has happened today.
I
But
just got imagery.
this is a story I've probably never told publicly, but I'm going to tell it now. So I go to preach for Craig. And I feel like I was coming back from somewhere. I think I was coming back from somewhere international. And I'm coming, and they do these video sermons that you record in a studio.
Right.
Which, if there was ever a miserable time in my life, it was all during 2020 preaching. Oh, I can tell stories from right there. There's people here right now that like multiple times in 2020, I'm 18 minutes into a sermon, I go, cut! Starting over. Like, can you imagine like the whole room full of people? I'm like preaching, I'm like, I lost it. Richie never had it. Let's start with that. Okay. It was just so difficult for me to find a flow and a cadence.
Right.
Anyways, I go to Life Church and I'm doing like 3 youth messages, and the message is like 15 minutes, which you already know. I have a hard time in that time code of like, do 12 minutes, which by the way is a really, really good skill to learn.
Yeah.
Following time and going, I can fill in, and that's actually called really great communication. But I'm doing like a 4-part series in 15-minute increments for the students. Then I'm going to do a weekend message. Well, Craig is like a machine. He's built different. I get there. He walks me into the studio. He shows me the studio. There's like the room's empty. He's like, all right, this is where we're going to be shooting from. And he goes, that's your camera. He's like, I always try to do 60-40, 60% to the camera, and then about, 40% to the live audience.
Right.
And I was like, well, how, that sounds good. I should try to do that. He's like, yeah. He's like, I would just say to you, look at the camera as much as you possibly can. Because what he said is that most people that come through there, they don't ever preach to a camera, so they don't ever look at the camera. They just play to the room. So what I heard was like, we've had everyone come through here and nobody can do it like this. I'm getting competitive in my mind. I'm like, well, bro, he's never met me. Like Joyce Meyer, who? Rick Warren, who? Like, you want me to look at the camera? I'll look at the camera.
Yeah.
But I think he was thinking I was going to go up there and do jokes to the audience the whole time and like never speak to like this greater audience, which is in all these locations. So I had to do these like 3 15-minute messages, and I came out and same thing. I wasn't really prepared. I'd never done that. I took like a sermon and tried to bite size it, but I'm trying to fill 15 minutes and have an open and a close. But I'm doing this in front of a live audience. So I do the first one, and I get done. He's like, "That was great. How soon can you do the next one?" I'm like, I'm ready now, but I'm not ready. But I'm like just too afraid to tell him, hey, I just need a moment. He's like, change your clothes. So I changed my clothes, and then I'd come back out and had to do another one. So I'm doing these like back to back. And I did 2 of the youth messages, and he's like, you ready for your Sunday service? I'm like, I'm totally ready. I'm totally ready. So I changed my shirt, come out, and I preached this message. Brother, I 100% of the time looked at the camera. I never even acknowledged anybody in the room. For 33 minutes straight, I'm like, ba, 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 ba. And I think what I said probably made sense, but there was no connection to anybody. Right. I get done, he's like, you ready for that last youth message? I'm like, yeah, totally ready. He's like, how much time do you need? I was like, I'm ready, Like I'm
it's
trying
like
to
an hour and a half of preaching at this point?
Yes. Like I haven't stopped preaching. I go and preach the next youth message. When I get done with the next youth message, he's like, man, I feel like you're warm now. He's like, why don't we run back that Sunday message?
Oh, wow.
You guys, I had to go in the back, change my clothes back to the outfit I had on before in the same audience. I had to re-preach the sermon. Can you imagine? I'm like, yeah, totally. I do feel warmer.
Now you're warm.
I do feel warm.
What a kind way to be like, we got to do that again.
He would no. He
That
is
the sweetest way to do
he
it.
is
That's
so
iconic.
sweet and so kind. If he was here and I'd be like, oh, Rich is. I'm telling you, bro. I preached the same sermon to the same group twice in a row. The first one, we didn't get it. The second one, we still didn't get it. But I was like.
But that's
Do you know how dumb you feel?
That's what we're going
I had
with.
to continue to preach in this. Like, yeah, sure, yeah.
That's such a
Yeah.
unique situation.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, I'm warm. You are right.
Yeah. You know what?
That's so good.
You feel looser now. I feel like you got
so
this
funny.
now. Yeah. It just took me the last 4 sermons.
Can I tell a Craig Rochelle story?
Yes.
This is like-
now that we're just using this podcast to talk about people, but yeah,
He
of
doesn't
course.
know that this
Craig, we
happened
love you.
the way it happened.
He's coming to Pastors Assembly 2025.
He's the greatest. Wow. I worked at Life Church for a summer. I actually lived with the
Humble brag.
with the Rochelles. Sam, his son's my best friend.
Humble
So-
brag.
So I've spent a lot of time with them, And Pastor Craig is the most disciplined person in the world. Like, his whole life is automated, meaning he's made all these pre-decisions that just keep his life running efficiently. Like, I think on Tuesdays, that's his sermon writing day, and he gets to the office at like 4 o'clock in the morning because he knows that by the time 9 o'clock rolls around, everyone's in the office, he's going to be pulled in every which way, and he won't have time to work on his message. So he gets there at 4 a.m. Like, the man's just a machine, but he's a machine in every way, like so diligent with his workouts, just on point with his diet. And in the summer that I lived with them, like, I never watched him cheat on his diet one time. Like, I'm pretty sure the man only has one slice of pizza a year, maybe two, but it's all in one sitting.
What a tragedy.
It's after the Global Leadership Summit in Chicago. He has some deep dish pizza. The man's just...
This is some of the greatest
if I'm
content
gonna
we've
go
ever
for
done.
one pizza a year, I might go New York pizza.
He's dialed in. He's a beast in every way, in the best way. But
have you ever seen him with his shirt off?
I have.
Yeah.
Keep telling the story.
So probably a month and a half ago.
I have. Sorry, keep going. We're gonna edit. It's fine.
Probably a month and a half ago, I was in Oklahoma staying with them because Sam, my best friend, his son was getting married, and it was the sixth and final Groeschel wedding. Sam was the last to get married out of all of his siblings. And so we're all just celebrating after the fact. And I'm staying with the Groeschels. And there's this spot in Oklahoma that I love. I actually think there's one in South Beach called, what's it called? Insomnia Cookies. Stay open until 3 a.m. You could they'll deliver them to wherever you're staying. And I love Insomnia Cookies, but there's none nearby where I live. So I ordered some Insomnia Cookies with Pastor Craig's daughter and son-in-law. And I was like, I'm going to get Pastor Craig to eat a cookie tonight. Like, there'd be under no other circumstance would he ever consider it, but I knew he was just on cloud nine. He like married off his final kid. I'm like, if I play this right, I may be able to get Craig Groeschel to eat a cookie. So we're all chilling after the fact in their kitchen. And like, I'm just asking Pastor Craig about all these things I know he loves to talk about. I'm learning so much. He's just spewing out wisdom. I'm like, okay, you want a snickerdoodle? Yeah. And he's just, I got him to eat a cookie. It was the greatest achievement of my life. I got Pastor Craig Groeschel to eat a snickerdoodle. He, to this day, unless he sees this clip or this podcast, like he doesn't know, but I 100% got him to eat
Had him locked
a cookie.
in.
Imagine that you've lived a life of such high character that when the scandal comes out and when they come for you to cancel you, the best stuff they've got on you is, I got him to eat a snickerdoodle.
Right.
If that is not a target of success, I don't know what is. Dakota's never woken up at 4 a.m.
All right.
Where does he begin?
Don't ask me.
He's stuck in Folsom Prison.
Right, exactly.
That's Johnny Cash.
4 a.m. Yeah, that's before the world wakes up.
It's amazing. Charlie, I think the question everyone wants to know is that you're in the ministry, you're 24 years of age, you're preaching all over the world. How does a guy like you date?
Not much. That's the short answer to that question. I mean, I'll go on dates, but I'm not dating anybody currently. I think dating in South Florida as a Christian person, not even being a pastor, but just being a Christian person is a little bit of a different situation.
Manu,
so
agree?
I don't date too much, but I'm open to.
Manu, what do you think about geographics in terms of where you date? I won't touch or talk to anybody from South Florida now. These are the people I serve.
You know, the Lord could bring whoever from wherever.
Wherever.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it's hard to try to maybe like date someone because like the role that you carry?
I think that's a good question to ask other people. Maybe, in my opinion. I would want to know what other people's thoughts are.
What do you mean?
From the dating pool, like, do they feel like it's hard to date?
You. Like in the sense of like, would maybe someone be afraid or almost standoffish because of your role? I'm asking in terms of you, do you find it hard to be like, I gotta like, do you think you're thinking even deeper about it because I'm publicly preaching the gospel and people see me this way, or that doesn't hit your mind the same way?
I think I did at one point.
Okay.
And then
Now it's
probably
like,
it was like, you know
this
what?
is my life. This is who I am.
Exactly. Yeah. Probably at one point you maybe put in your mind that it has to be a certain way or a certain person, but I think I've let go of some of that to make it a little less difficult, because you can paint a picture in your mind, and I think having a certain picture in your mind is something that can hold you off of different people who might want to approach. But I think I've been just a little bit more open to just like, all right, let's just.
I don't want to overthink this.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. There probably was some overthinking.
Early on.
Yes. But now it's like, all right, let's see. I'm open, but I'm also very content with my life. And so.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what about you?
Is it hard to date being a pastor?
Yeah, I never had to do that.
It's always on my mind. Like, I'm very aware that there's a certain level of just eyes that will always be on me, especially within the context of my church because of the title and the position that I carry.
Like, would you date a girl from Church by the Glades?
100% I would, but I haven't met any girls yet at Church by the Glades that I've been interested in that way. I don't know. Maybe there's something going on subconsciously that I can't even wrap my mind around quite yet, and that's maybe been why I haven't. But just so far, I just haven't met someone that I've connected with at my own church. But I would totally be open to it. I think that would actually be ideal in many ways, make things a whole lot easier if they were already at Church by the Glades or at First Baptist Fort Lauderdale.
What does your mom and dad tell you about the girl you marry?
Not much. There's like, she better be great. She better love Jesus. She better have a calling of her own. Like, my criteria, and I love to hear like kind of what you look for as well, is like, this is nothing too specific. It's like, I got to be physically attracted to you, because that's normally the first thing you notice is, are you attracted to them? They have to love God with all their heart. They have to love the church, and then they have to have a calling of their own. And then lastly, like, you have to have things in common with them. Like, I have to think you're a good-looking person. Cool, maybe I do. You love Jesus, that's great. But we also have to have more in common than just Jesus.
Chemistry.
Right.
Because we're going to lose stuff to talk about at a certain point. Like, there has to be more to this than just our relationship with God. That has to be the most important thing. We got to hold that above everything else. But I want to be able to have actual conversations with you beyond that.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. For me, it doesn't, because I get the question often, does he have to be a pastor? Does he have to be in ministry?
Does
he? He doesn't. And maybe I have a preference of not. I don't even know. Like, I think that it doesn't have to be like my world. You know what I mean? It's like, we're going to come together and create a world together. So it doesn't just have to be, this is what I do. You need to do the exact same thing as me. And I think what I've found is, it is intriguing to me, people who do things differently, who think differently, who are in a different industry, and in a different worldview, because, and not worldview in terms of religion.
Yeah.
But more so just like,
time,
this
space,
is their
energy.
sphere of influence. This is what they do. That has been of interest to me. And yeah, I think the common thing, do you love God? Do you hear from the Lord? I think that's been an important thing for me, because there's a lot of people that I've met. I'm like, all right, you love God, but I don't know if you're being led or directed by him in a way that would lead and direct me. And I think that's what I've found that is more important to me than I think things that I had thought were important. I realized, that actually is not as important, because I don't see any way that you can lead or direct a family if we had one, because you might love God, but I don't know if you like love him in a way that would be able to lead other people. And that doesn't mean people can't grow into that, but I think that just even as a woman, I was like, all right, I want to make sure that there is direction, and that there isn't just like, you don't know what you're doing, you have no idea. Right. I think that I'm at a point of like, you have to have some kind of direction. I'm not expecting this I've got a 10-year plan, I know this, and this, but it's like, if you don't know what you want and you don't know what the Lord is asking out of you at this stage, I just can't waste time with people who don't have direction at this point. And so, yeah, I think for me, it's like, all right, do you have direction? Do you love God? Do you love people? Are you kind? Are you relatable? Can you be around other people? You know, you don't have to be this extrovert personality, but, you know, can you be around people? Can you learn how to, be in different environments, different spaces? And so
both of you, obviously, I think those, being attracted to someone, loving the Lord, but both of you are going to require someone who's very secure. Mm-hmm. You guys are just too strong not to. And I think, if anything, the challenge more so is just meeting someone who you're equally yoked with.
Right.
I think that I would imagine that the challenge at times could be that people think that they know a lot more about you, or they perceive a version of you. They see you on a stage, they hear you preach, they listen to you on a podcast. It's like, I kind of know Charlie. And so with that, it's that same thing. It's like the tip of the iceberg, but there's so much more to Manu than just preaching and working in the church and even her calling. I think that you have to get to know her personality and who she is. And I think people could be timid and afraid. And so I think both of you would sniff that out so quickly. And they don't have to have this extroverted personality, but they better be secure. They better be
Right.
strong.
Totally.
And they better be able to walk on their own 2 feet and stand next to you and lead, guide,
Well
and
said.
stand with you and actually. What's the right word I'm looking for? Like collaborate with you. I think that the calling side is interesting. They don't have to be a preacher,
Right?
But they better
It needs to
respect
be a
that
part. Yeah,
and
there
understand
should
that.
be
and-
some kind of partnership where I'm like, oh, I am now better because we're together
Yep,
and we are
totally.
pushing the mission of God forward. It's like, all right, I want a kingdom partnership. Then I'm like, all right, together we now can do the work of the
Yes.
Lord in a way that, yes, I was doing it alone, but now that I come alongside you, it shouldn't diminish for me and it shouldn't
Right.
diminish for you. It's like,
Right.
oh,
Enhance.
you know, this is like, all right, 2 are better than 1. Now it's 2 of us. We should be on an accelerated
Right.
track for the kingdom. And I think that's what I'm looking for. I was like,
Yeah.
this is the kingdom partnership for me. It's like, I want my
Well
marriage
said.
to represent Christ, and I want it to do it in a way where our kids, our legacy, our life is like, okay, we are a family
Very
that
good.
serves God on mission. Like, I don't want just companionship. It's like, yeah, we want all of that stuff, but it's like, all right, what is our joining together going to do for the kingdom? And I think that's how I look at it now. That I don't know if I've always looked at it that way, but it's like, I think I'm in a season where I'm like, yeah, I look at my marriage as like, okay, what is the purpose for the kingdom that we can join together and actually be effective in reaching people and reaching souls for Jesus.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
What I get from that is your calling doesn't have to be the same as your spouse, but your calling better align with your
Right.
spouses. Like that's how I think neither one of you, what God's called you to, diminishes in any way
Right.
when you come together. Like she doesn't have to be a preacher. She doesn't have to be called to vocational ministry where she's sitting in a church office Monday through Friday and then at church all day on Sunday. But she better have some kind of calling that doesn't take away from me doing that. And she better not have some kind of calling that whatever I'm called to, that being a pastor, like doesn't take away from whatever God's called her to. Like
Very good.
we got to be
Yeah.
able to support each other in a way that probably adds to what each other are doing, but doesn't necessarily have to mean that we're both called to the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think you can make it about a job. And I think what you guys are saying is you need to be on the same level of spiritual maturity.
Right.
Good.
I think that if there's a shallowness and then a depth and relationship with God, they're not going to be able to speak into your life.
Right.
And I think for me, whenever I began to date Blair, one of the things that I subconsciously loved about her, that now I consciously love about her, is that she called me to a higher standard. And I think there's so much growth that is missed out on by men and women who relegate and diminish their marriage to their spouse only being their cheerleader
Right.
and not allowing them to be their coach.
That's great.
Wow.
Because I think that your spouse knows you better than anyone. And I'm grateful for the times that I got off, and whether it was my leader or somebody, hey, great job. I'm grateful for the honest conversation afterwards where Blair said, hey, this is, you did a great job. Here's some things that I saw. That's been some of the most growth that's happened in my life has been someone that's been able to be honest with me,
Beautiful.
that I know that I can receive the feedback. When I began to date Blair, I started talking different. I started acting different. I started hanging out with different groups of people. And immaturity says, oh, she changed. You can't be yourself around her. No, I'm going to be myself. I'm going to be a better self.
Great.
And I think that that's scary and that's uncomfortable for people that get in dating relationships where there's things that's called up on them. And Pastor Don Cherry was talking about in a sermon recently that it's a tension. And sometimes we can feel tension in relationships and want to bail because we think it's a bad thing. But I think tension in not just our friendships, but sometimes in our dating relationships, for sure in our marriage, is so many times will lead to growth. Iron sharpens iron, not comfortable. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
for me, I think what you guys are saying, it's not a job. It's not, hey, we don't have to be called to the same thing, but we better be spiritually mature in the same way.
Yeah.
Charlie, what are some, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but like what are some trends, maybe negative trends or things that maybe I wouldn't be aware of in my seat today that's happening in the dating pool that you're aware of? Like these terms I hear like ghosting or DMing, like how do
Like,
people—
I love that DMing
Trends.
these
Yeah.
are the terms that I've never heard of.
well,
DMing.
like, popping up in the, like,
Just kidding.
how do people like, what's like sort of like the play these days?
It's a great question.
Like I think when I
like
was
if you're teaching a
not that I'm
dating series at Raleigh, like what do you making sure that you're hitting like in relationships or something?
Or what? I don't know. Like, how does a
yeah.
dude come and holler these days? Like I guess I'm not like I'm so old, but like I met Dawn. I had to ask for her phone number, and then I had to phone call her. Like I just think these days it feels like there's dating apps, and I'm not even against all these things. I'm just trying to figure out. I hear these terms like they ghosted me. Like people go on dates, and then all of a sudden they just completely disappear. That seems sort of strange to me.
That is, that I don't know, definitely a thing. And I think the way that it kind of works, I think for me, everybody kind of dates differently. I think it's more been like a natural, like, all right, I've connected with someone, you know, whether it be through a DM, but it might be a mutual friend that I know or something. Or
so people have cold DM'd you and you got in a relationship, not a relationship, but you started, not a relationship, but I'm saying maybe like you formed a friendship or.
Yeah, but not as, like a random person sends me a DM. There's some connection, some point or whatever.
Okay.
I think that's somehow how it can happen naturally. But in terms of the ghosting thing, it is very real for somebody to go on a date and somebody not reach out again. And so it's a very real thing of like, all right, we went on a date and then we don't ever talk again.
No clarity on the back end of that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever, I don't know if I'm like DM'd someone like, hey, you have, okay. What does that sound like? How would you do that?
I mean, it depends on the person. I wouldn't DM someone now, maybe in high school wouldn't take this unless I saw that they clearly love Jesus on their page. So I'd probably say something like, I have done this. Like,
tell me.
One, you got to be physically attracted to them. Like I said, they have to love Jesus. So I would say something like, I think you're beautiful. I think your love for Jesus is beautiful. I would love the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better.
Hi, I'm Charlie. I think you're beautiful.
Yes.
I think you're wow.
I would do that. I have done that.
Shoot or shoot.
That is shoot or shoot. That's direct.
And it's not like you're doing that all the time.
Pilar, anyone ever DM you like
right?
that back in the day? Maybe? I don't think so. No, so you would DM that way? Maybe? No? No. Oh, okay. People getting real shy on set today.
Nelson's was definitely a yes.
I think you're beautiful. Your love for Jesus, can we hang out, is very direct. That's probably not as direct as
how would that hit you? Because I'm not even trying to be I'm just like, maybe if the person you saw on the other side was beautiful and a love for Jesus too, you might like it.
Right. If there was interest there, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's bold. And, you know, and I think with adults, you have the opportunity to be like, hey, thank you so much. I'm good. Or let's pursue this further.
The reason I would go about it that bold is because I'm only going to DM someone that I have minimal relationship with. Like, if I'm DMing somebody, it's probably because I don't see them normally. Sure. So I'm not trying to waste my time trying to like warm up to like, all right, now here's me shooting my shot. Like, I'm just going to go for it, see what happens. Yeah. If you say no, you say no. Cool. Like,
has it ever gone terrible doing that or gone
not
great?
Terrible. I've had like,
I'm not interested.
I can think of one time when like someone just didn't respond.
Ooh.
I'm like, oh well, that's it.
Did they see the
message? I don't think I've ever shot my shot through a DM without the girl following me back first. Like, I don't think I've ever DM'd someone that I haven't followed. So I wait for the follow back, get the follow back. I'm like, I think that's enough of a green light to see what's up.
Open.
And then,
have you ever made a guy friend just by DMing them cold like that?
A lot of my ministry friends who live elsewhere, I've met through Instagram.
Really?
Yeah.
And what does that sound like? What's up, bro? That's awesome.
Hey, bro, seems like you're doing great stuff. Cool. I love this clip you posted. I would love to like hear more about what God's doing in your life.
Have you done that?
No.
You don't actually go on social media, so you're not fun to talk
Dakota's
to.
not really into the
I'm going to, though. Mature me's on social media.
Bro.
I mean, it might be better for you now.
Been saying that for 8 years.
Would you make friends? Would someone DM you make some friends?
I've actually made some pretty close friends through...
Like that kind of a scenario?
Yeah, it was in the pandemic. You guys know Mike and Gia.
Of course.
From Vegas. Gia had reached out and she was like, hey, like I really want to talk about ministry. And I didn't know who she was, but I saw that we had some mutual friends. I was like, yeah, let's get like on a Zoom or a FaceTime. And we got on a Zoom. I don't even know what form of communication, but we got on a call of some sort.
And talking,
like,
hey.
And now she's one of my dearest friends.
Wow.
And so we just like connected through Instagram. And so there are some people that like friends, ministry that we're like, oh yeah, we started this.
I think that's cool. It's interesting.
It is kind of cool. I love that about Instagram.
It's nowhere in my life when I was in my 20s or
right,
something
that you would be able to connect with people in that way.
It's a different world. It's cool. Charlie, one of the cool things that you're doing right now is you've been leading Rally for how many years? 19 to 25?
Yeah, we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary.
And what God's doing there is pretty remarkable and
Thanks.
special. This past rally, maybe a month or so ago, you guys had over 1,200 people there.
Mm-hmm.
Just crazy. What would you say that you're seeing? And once again, I ask these questions like I'm some old dude, but like, what are you seeing in the generation right now when it comes to hunger for God and zeal for the Lord and passion for his house?
It's a great question. I see a beautiful openness in my generation, like maybe different from even people 10, 15 years older than me, or at least what I've heard about whatever that generation would be. People, young millennials, Gen Z, they're very spiritual. So they're very open. They may not say, I follow Jesus, but they're like, yeah, I think there's a God. I'm not quite sure who he is, but I'm down to hear about who you might think he is. So it's been cool to see people walk in with kind of arms already unfolded and just wanting to hear what Jesus is all about. I think that's been really cool, and I don't think that's unique to South Florida. I think that's kind of going on everywhere. It seems like God's doing a really cool work in many different young adult ministries all over the country.
Yeah.
Like, what you guys did at Rendezvous was legendary, and in many ways we're just using the play you guys ran so well at Rally and just doing our best Rendezvous impression month in and month out. But I feel like in many ways, young adult ministry is kind of like the final frontier of church, at least in North America. Like, the vast majority of churches have a kids ministry. Most churches have a student ministry. But even out of maybe the biggest churches with the most resources, only very few of them have young adult ministries. And what works in South Florida maybe wouldn't work in Dallas, Texas. And what works in Dallas, Texas maybe wouldn't work in Seattle. So it's really interesting to figure out what young adults are looking for in a young adult ministry. But I sense this beautiful openness, and just you have to figure out how to speak the language of the young adults where you're at to clearly communicate to them who Jesus is and how he loves them. And then from there, I think God's just doing something in my generation where I think there's a harvest to reap if we would just figure out how to communicate Jesus clearly.
What are some of the things that you're seeing right now in the people that you're reaching in terms of just stories and testimonies?
We've just seen, especially at Rally, I've heard just a lot of stories recently of just young adults who have tried everything and anything but Jesus.
Wow.
And they've kind of come to their wits' end at even a young age. And they're like, all right, I've tried drugs, I've tried sex, I've tried a career, I've tried a relationship, I've tried going out, and all those things work for a moment, but they never truly satisfy. So I need the living water that only Jesus can give me. They wouldn't obviously use that language, but that's what they're looking for, and that's what their soul is thirsting for. And we just had many cool stories recently of just seeing young adults who have tried this and tried that, but they never really gave Jesus a shot. And I tell people, like, don't give Jesus a shot. Like, I'm telling you, give your life to him.
Come on.
It's when you have an actual relationship with Jesus, that's when everything will change for you. And as we've just been that plain and that clear and challenged young adults to, like, forsake everything else they've tried and truly go all in with Jesus, we've seen some really beautiful transformation take place in the lives of young adults at Rally.
I really believe that God's plan is always a person.
Yep.
He always anoints a man. He always anoints a woman. It's going to carry a vision and then walk it out with passion. And then within that space, create so many opportunities for people to come and find a home. And Jesus said it, right? The harvest is plentiful, but the worker is few. And I just always commend you and celebrate you that you are a young leader who's rising up saying, I'm not just a preacher, but I'm carrying a vision to see a generation of people follow God. And I think that your life encourages a lot of people to go and live out their calling. One of the things that I think we all sort of admire about you is that when you do preach, there's all sorts of different styles of preaching. We love it all, but you preach with a lot of boldness and a lot of passion. And you would make all of us believe that there's a fire on the inside of you. What would you say to somebody out there, to us? Like, where does that fire come from, and how do you maintain and stoke up? How do you stay passionate? Like, what lights you on fire?
Such a good question. Thank you for saying that, first of all. That's very kind. And I see that fire in you. So that's why I love anytime I can get around you. I feel like that fire in me builds and gets a little bit hotter when I can get close to someone else who has a flame on the inside of them. That's I feel that way about all you guys. So anytime I get around any of you, I cherish truly. I think you got to stay in the Word. Honestly, you got to nurture that relationship with Jesus. It's the fire of the Holy Spirit that I hope people are feeling and sensing when they get around me. And I hope they just don't feel that when I'm preaching, but they feel that when I'm living. Like I hope people see Jesus in me when I'm not holding a mic.
Great.
But I think it's as simple as that. Not to try to oversimplify it, but it's like I can't talk to you about Jesus if I haven't been talking with Jesus. I'm not gonna have anything to say unless he speaks to me first. And I can't help but get excited when I feel like God has spoken to me.
Very good.
Like I can't keep it in. I have to get it out. And there's just an excitement that comes with revelation. And I gotta get what's in my heart, in your heart, or in your head. And it's a beautiful thing to feel like you have a message. I've heard people hate like kind of calling sermons messages, but it's like the idea of a message excites me, because if I have to come up with what's being said, then it's not going to change anybody. But if I feel like I truly have a message from God, then it takes the pressure off of me, one, because I don't have to come up with what's being said, and two, I just get to function as a mailman. Like no one thinks about the mailman when a piece of mail is delivered. You think about the person who sent the mail.
Right.
So if I can just be the mailman,
Good word.
but I know it's a good gift that I'm delivering because it came from him, then I can't help but be excited when I put it in someone else's hand. So I think the more you talk to Jesus,
Powerful.
the more you'll live with a fire, the more you'll live with a passion and excitement. It's
powerful.
And I think the people who you're preaching to will feel that.
I also think that one of the things that I've learned just doing anything, and I think people can definitely pick up from you, is the first story that you told about preaching, and you went 13 minutes. That was not fun.
No, terrible.
And that day you probably didn't have much passion on the stage. And I think passion also comes from a season and another season of preparation.
Right.
And I think it's fun to do something that you know you can do. You know what I mean? I was playing like a game with people last night, and I was trying to get them going, and I was making them do things that I knew that they weren't like, go make us laugh. It's like, well, that's not fun to me. Why? Because I don't know how to do that. And I think what I'm encouraged by you is one of the reasons that you can go up and preach so boldly is because there's been time and time and time again that you've sharpened your set of tools that you have to communicate the gospel. And I think people can belittle that. And it's like, oh, that's a shallow thing to say. It's just about understanding God's word. Yeah, it's about understanding God's word, but then you have to learn how to communicate that.
Right.
You can take that to anything that you do in life. Is the better you get at something, the more comfortable you're going to be to do it. And I believe the more fun it's going to be, and you can preach it with that passion.
Totally.
Both of you guys, all three of you guys preach with, I think, a lot of emotion. I think that when you come around the text and you present it and proclaim it, you do so with a deep sense of feeling. And anything you would say about that? Like, I know it sounds maybe like a strange question, but there's a lot of people that maybe just preach from the head.
Right.
And I don't want to presume that I know what anybody else is doing. I just know you guys and watch you guys. I think that when you go up there, that you're feeling what you're saying. And I think all of you guys present wonderful, wonderful doctrine, wonderful truth. I'm not acting like it's just sensationalism or emotionalism. I think it's a great balance of what you do. You present incredible content. You all know the gospel. You all live it out. I know all of your personal lives. You guys are people of character. But is there anything that you would say towards how I do this week in and week out and how I bring emotion to it?
Yeah, I think that for me, what I've even found recently, sometimes when I'm reading the text, and I don't know why, like I'll start like weeping over some scriptures, and that'll be a telltale sign of like, okay, what is God speaking to me? And is this a message that I need to bring to other people? I was reading Mark 5 and just reading about the man who was in the cave that got free from the demon, and then the woman with the issue of blood, and then the little girl who was raised from the dead. And I read that text, and I just saw the compassion of Jesus, and I just began to weep over the text, and I was just like, it wasn't even like I was trying to work up this emotion or trying to like be weepy over the text, but it was just in an atmosphere of worship, of just reading the text and really leaning into the passion of who Jesus was that brought something out in me in my personal time. And then when I had to go preach it, it was like, okay, this is just an overflow of what has really moved me. You know, like I'll read the Great Commission sometimes and just weep over it, because I'm like, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Am I preaching the gospel? Am I teaching the gospel? Am I making disciples? Am I doing these things that the text is asking of us? And am I empowering other people to do the same. And I think that time in the Word and that time in prayer, of prayerfully just like sitting over the text and putting yourself into the text and seeing, okay, Jesus loved me this much that he did that, and not letting it be this surface level thing that we just hear about, and letting it be real in my life,
Right.
I think is what brings out that emotion of like, oh no, I'm weeping over this text of God healing somebody because I know God to be a healer. I'm looking
Good.
at this text of God restoring and healing somebody because I've seen him do it in other people's lives. And me seeing that ignites something in me like, oh, he can do that in somebody else's life. And
That's
I want to
great.
be able to let people open up the text and know, okay, if you're oppressed, you can be set free.
Come on.
If you are sick,
Amen.
you can be healed. If you are dead, you can be resurrected. And that is the message that I want to bring to life. And because I know that he can do it, there's just like, okay, this is real for me. And so I've just allowed the Holy Spirit in the times of me reading the text of like, Lord, don't just open up my mind. I want my mind to be open to understand the scriptures, but I also want my heart to be softened to actually see
Great.
the word in a way
Beautiful.
that can move me and that I can help let people see the promises and the love of Jesus. And so it's just that sitting in the text and just like, Holy Spirit, can you just show me? Can you move me to this place of sensitivity and to this place of passion? And so I think that's what it's been like for me.
It's great.
Yeah, I think for me, I have a lot of thoughts to that. I think that usually at most you're in church twice a week. This is not an everyday communication style. This is like you get one chance to be together. I look at church as like a celebration, like
Awesome.
if we're all praying every morning, I'm probably not going to preach the same way that I would on a Sunday than I would on a Tuesday morning where we're opening God's word. I think whenever I look at church, I look at the people that are coming, I view it as like a celebration. And then I also view it as like, why do I preach the way I do? I think that it's who God created me to be. And I think that that's when you get around a great leader, I think they don't encourage you to be like them. They encourage you to be like you. And I think for me, if I was out at a after party MCing, like I'm going to be yelling, I'm going to be having fun. If I'm on a football field, I'm going to be getting people fired up. If we're doing a loadout at 10 p.m., this is who I am,
Right.
So I think for me, what you've said in the past is that preaching, you're putting yourself on full display. And so I think that's part of it. And I also think that, like you're saying, at the end of the day, it's like who we're trying to go after. I think it should break your heart. I think that's a fruit of the Holy Spirit that Dr. Tennyson, I think I've said it in this podcast, when he boils down the sign of the Holy Spirit. What's the sign of the Holy Spirit? It's not necessarily speaking in tongues. It's love for people.
Wow.
With the time with the Holy Spirit, it will break your heart for the world. Right. And I think that when you start getting in a text and you start thinking about, there's going to be people that are really struggling their faith, really struggling their marriage, I think that you go, God, I want to speak to these people with everything that I got. Good. And I want to bring my best self, but I don't want them to hear me. I want them to hear you.
Beautiful.
And so I think those are some of the things that I think about. My mom's dad died when she was 3 years old. I never met my grandfather on my mom's side, but her older sister had more of a relationship with my grandfather than my mom because my mom was so young. And my mom sent one of my sermons to her sister, and her sister wrote back, "This reminds me so much of Dad." Wow. And so that was a really cool moment for me, just thinking about legacy and stuff. I never met that guy. He was a preacher of the gospel. But when I say it's in me, I think it's like, I guess it's part of, who I am. And what you always say is like, we are, our family. We're online. Obviously, there's things we can be delivered from. But I think that for me, that passion has kind of been going for a few generations now.
It's really beautiful.
Wow.
I love that idea, if it doesn't mess with you, it's not going to mess with them.
Yeah.
Good.
Right. If it doesn't break your heart, it's not going to break their heart. If it doesn't encourage you, why would it encourage them?
Right.
If it doesn't make you laugh, it's never going to make them laugh. Go on and on and on. If it doesn't make you shout, it's not going to make them shout. So always trying to come around it from a place of what's the Lord doing in me, and then trying to step up onto that stage with an overflow that I've already been with him in private. And now we are just stepping into where we've been in private, and we're bringing that into the public. And it makes a difference. I think that it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Right.
And all of you guys do such a wonderful job at that. Charlie, we love you so much.
Love you.
You're going to be a regular around here on Mature Me. part of the home team as far as I'm concerned.
That's right.
What's an area right now that you go, I've got to mature in? I'm 24. What's a focal point right now? Maybe you'd say I'm immature in this area. It's quite clear. We don't need all 10 things, but what's the thing right now you're going, this is an area I really want to grow in?
I'm trying to grow up all around, honestly. A few weeks back, I was preaching in Dallas, and I was spending a few days there. So I text your good friend, Pastor Robert Madu, see if he would want to get a meal or a workout in. And he was like, yeah, let's work out at this place he likes to work out, and we'll grab breakfast afterwards. And he was kind of let me ask him really any questions I had about life, preaching, leadership. And at the end of the meal, I asked him, like, all right, if there's just any advice you would give 24-year-old guy who's trying to just steward a call to ministry, what would it be? And he said, I don't want to butcher what he said, but something to the effect of, like, try to adopt disciplines for the season of life you're not yet in. I was like, sheesh, that's good.
It's phenomenal.
For me, like, I'm a single dude. I'm not married. I have no kids. So honestly, at this point in my life, like, me being undisciplined doesn't affect anybody really but me. So it's easy to be undisciplined for that reason. Like, I can wake up 10 minutes before I got to get to work if I want to. But one day I will be a husband, and one day I will be a dad. And if I want to be the leader that the next growth barrier rally needs, then I probably need to adopt certain disciplines that get me ready for that phase of life. Very and just good. Don't expect all that to happen by accident. So, like, as funny as it may sound, like, I'm trying to get up earlier now. I'm trying to go to bed earlier now. I'm trying just to be better at communicating with those that I'm leading. I'm just in little ways, I'm trying to just become more disciplined in kind of every aspect of my life, because I believe these small disciplines are going to compound and make me just that much better over time. So I'm just trying to adopt disciplines in this moment that help me be the leader I want to be in the next moment.
I think it's beautiful. That's a worthy goal, to say the least.
Yeah.
And I like that idea that habits eat willpower for breakfast.
Right.
And we are, honestly, at the end of the day, the result of our disciplines.
Right.
And I believe anything you put your mind to, you're going to see it accomplished. We love you so much.
Love you.
Friends, Charlie Hughes, Manouchka Charles, Dakota, Duron. If you enjoyed this today, leave us a comment right here on YouTube or wherever you're watching it from. Go ahead, share it, like it, subscribe to the channel. There's always fresh, hot off the press content coming to you every Tuesday right here on the Mature Me podcast.